Hi, I'm Dave Van Oss, Agricultural Markets Manager for Libro Credit Union. Libro is very excited to be this year's presenting sponsor for the Virtual Outdoor Farm Show. We truly hope that your farm business finds great value with this upcoming session.
Hi, I'm Laura Rance, Vice President of Content for Glacier FarmMedia. I'm joined here today with well-known food commentator Sylvain Charlebois, who is a professor of food distribution and policy in the Faculty of Management and Agriculture at Dalhousie University. Thanks for joining us at Canada's Digital Farm Show, Sylvain.
My pleasure.
You know, as we look back over the past several months, in hindsight, the pandemic is something we should have predicted, and yet it caught all of us by surprise. Generally speaking, when you look at the impacts that it's had, how has the food system held up under the strain of this?
Well, I felt confident going into the pandemic about the food industry. I feel even more confident now. I mean, it's been tested. No, there's no doubt. And we saw weaknesses here and there. The challenge, of course, is to predict demand. Demand was erratic. From one week to another, we didn't know what to expect from consumers, but the response was actually quite strong, I thought. The weakest link, I believe, was more in processing. We saw some challenges there, especially in livestock. And of course, afterwards, we saw, because of the fact that food service was shut down, there were many products that were no longer needed, created surpluses at farm gate. So we had to deal with that as well. But overall, I thought it was very well handled. We're now almost into the fall, and still things look okay. There are concerns for the fall here and there in North America, but overall, we should feel confident about what's coming up here. Even if there is a second wave, I do believe that we're in good shape.
The impact probably on first line or primary producers was probably the least, if you think about the fact that they were, very used to self-isolating already, just because of the nature of the work they do. Has that sector kind of been able to adapt quickly enough, do you think, to what's coming in the next few months? I mean, this is obviously not over at this point in time.
The reality of ranching and farming is, of course, probably was reassuring for a lot of farmers. But of course, we've seen some challenges, especially, and I'm thinking about Essex County in Ontario, where there were many outbreaks, and now the sector itself, farming, actually is the number one sector generating the most cases, COVID cases. And I suspect, I'm not suggesting that there was a complacency, but I suspect because there's a way of life in farming that really doesn't make COVID a menace, so we wouldn't see COVID as a menace. I actually grew up on farms, so I totally understand that. But COVID is different, and it was different for everyone, and it was something that no one has ever actually dealt with before. So of course, we had this Cargill case in Alberta, which really became a huge problem, and the fact that workers were transiting and working or living together outside facilities or the facility where they worked, it became a problem. And farmers in different parts of the country actually had to face that same reality. So it's not just about physical distancing, but it's about how you manage your business overall and how you manage your employees from the time they get up in the morning. Yeah, and from the time they get up in the morning until the night they go to bed. And that's a reality that really no employer has had to face until now.
I think farmers have been historically very adept and very secure in terms of preparing for a livestock disease, but nothing that affects people in this way. What was it that surprised you the most about how it played out in the food system? I mean, was it the effects on the workers in the system, or were there other surprises that this brought to the surface?
Overall, I'm surprised by the fear factor, because we have to remind ourselves that we've been trying to cope with this threat with little or no science, really. I mean, we know little about this virus. So a lot of public health decisions have been made based on little or no science. And that's not necessarily what we teach in school. We actually teach to students how to make science-based decisions. It's the same in farming, it's the same in processing. And so that was a bit surprising to me. However, you have to have faith in the system. You have to have faith in the leaders making decisions, whether or not you actually agree with them or not. But many of these decisions have actually had a huge impact on the food industry, in food service, food retail, processing, farming, everywhere. And as we learn more about this virus, I hope that we'll adapt. I hope that policies and regulations will also adapt as well, and not make some of these measures very political, because we're starting to see that right now. We're starting to see many of these decisions become politicized. And as soon as you politicize any measure related to public health, well, it polarizes people. And that's the last thing you want during a pandemic.
I find that really interesting, you pointing that out. In this case, the pandemic or the event was moving faster than the science could catch up. I mean, we're really playing catch up when it comes to understanding, and we do understand more about it now than we did 4 months ago, but there's still a lot still emerging every day, and now there's a little bit of conflicting science coming to the fore. So how does that play into that whole vulnerability, I guess, that you mentioned in terms of it becoming politicized and polarized?
Oh, absolutely. It's nerve-wracking for business folks out there, for sure, because you don't know exactly what measures will be taken in order to manage risks. But when it becomes politicized, you're not just looking at risk, you're also looking at perceptions and fears, and governments will always try to manage fears more so than the actual risks. And that's the danger. And so looking at a potential second wave into the fall, I'm just hoping that rational heads will eventually prevail, because lockdowns, as we experience in the spring, is something that we can't afford over and over again. We're looking at right now public figures. We saw numbers coming out of Ottawa looking at a deficit of almost $400 billion, and our debt will exceed a $1 trillion. So those are massive numbers. And so we have to take care of Canadians and making sure that they are safe. But at the same time, we also need to make sure that Canadians remain food secure. And the only way to do that is to actually keep the economy going, to generate more wealth, so fewer households experience food insecurity. And if you keep people working, you'll actually make sure that it does happen. And we have to remind ourselves of that.
So, I mean, we keep talking about post-pandemic and when things get back to normal, but what you're really describing to me is, we really have to learn how to live with this, and we're looking at a new normal. What kinds of implications do you see? How do you see that playing out down to the producer level in terms of how that will affect how they operate?
I think we have to apply rigor as much as possible. I mean, the mask is a very visual emblem of the compromise we have to make here. I think everyone has to accept that we need to wear a mask to keep everyone safe as much as possible, and live with these kinds of measures. And they'll probably allow people to roam around safely, and keep people safe while they actually play an active role in the economy, I think that's a desirable scenario moving forward. And as a farmer, you also need to be cognizant of the fact that people out there are scared, and we have to reassure people that things are going to be okay. Farmers actually have a lot of currency, social currency. I mean, people will listen to farmers, and they have a reassuring voice. I would take advantage of it as much as possible, especially now.
Do you think that farmers have actually gained a little bit of? I mean, we've all talked over the past few years about farmers feeling a little bit marginalized and a little bit picked on by society. I mean, there's voices out there and elements out there that want to criticize modern agriculture. Do you think that there is sort of a rethinking of that? There's a new appreciation of just the kind of role that a modern, well-functioning, well-regulated food system plays in a society?
I would answer in two ways. One, it depends which sector. Some sectors actually didn't look all that great, to be honest. During the pandemic, we've heard stories of some animals being euthanized. I believe over 2 million chickens were euthanized in Quebec, about 200 hogs in PI. Those are stories that really will make urbanites a little bit nervous. So there's some work to be done there. But there is a difference between farmers and farming. Farming is a target. Farmers are reassuring. Farmers as individuals are loved and respected. Farming, less so. And what we've seen over the last few years is our interest groups really targeting at the practice itself, the profession, and practices in general, and how we produce things. The individuals doing the work, I don't think the respect that they deserve has been affected at all, to be honest. And again, I've always told farmers, get out there and show what you can do, but also make an effort to understand consumers. Correct. The one opportunity that COVID has provided farmers is to pivot more and engage with consumers, and not just to try to understand them, but to sell them what they do and vertically integrate. So 5 months ago, it was almost impossible to self-isolate because you had to rely on family members and friends to get you food. Now, within a couple of hours, you can get all your food delivered, and the order will be accurate as well. And prices are okay. They're not better than in store, but at least they're okay. So things have changed dramatically. That access to consumers is gold for farmers. Who wouldn't want to buy directly from farmers? Right. Pure, authentic food. There are groups in Canada that are taking advantage of that, and I would encourage all farmers to do the same.
So that's one of the things that have changed. I mean, a lot of consumers are actually dabbling or trying out these systems. I mean, online food purchasing has been available for a while, but most of us have never even considered it. Now they are considering it. That's one of the things that probably won't go back once everything opens up again. What are some of the other things that have perhaps fundamentally changed as a result of this?
Well, it's hard to avoid the issue of food service. I mean, before COVID, almost 40% of our money was spent on food processed and consumed outside the home. That all changed. Actually, a month into the pandemic, that ratio went from 40-60 to 9-91. Wow. That was a dramatic shift, and then we're back now to maybe 78-22, maybe, and we could go up to 70-30 within the next year. But that 30 is going to look a whole lot different, and so because more people are going to be spending their money in retail, and guess what? Farmers get more out of retail than in food service. Every dollar spent in food service, farmers will get on average 4 to 6 cents per dollar. In a food store, at the grocery store, it goes up to 21, 22 cents. That's a huge gain. So the more people spend money in food retail, the more farmers get back. And that's a key ratio to remember.
And then what's the potential then for people, farmers who are marketing direct to the consumer through an online service? How does that change that ratio?
Well, it increases even more because you control the whole supply chain. So at the very minimum, you have gain. I actually do believe that COVID is going to be a good thing for most farmers in the future. You just have to take advantage of it. You have to understand the arithmetics behind food distribution. If you look at the arithmetics of food distribution, farmers are looking good.
It's, I guess potentially, and this is maybe taking it too far along that trade of thought, but potentially every consumer could have their own farmer.
And absolutely. Another example, because of COVID, we actually weren't able to get seafood. And we're in Halifax here, we're right next to the ocean, and we couldn't get seafood. We actually were able to find a fisherman selling food online we didn't even know existed before COVID. There's going to be a lot of virtual discoveries, a lot of people looking around online, and so try to get some space there, and I suspect it will benefit you. Of course, it depends what you want to do with your business. It depends who you are and where you are. But there's going to be more traffic online. If you get organized, there is potential there. The other thing that farmers may want to think about are ghost kitchens. Ghost kitchens are set up in close to urban centers, and they don't have a label. It's just a box filled with cooks, and they prepare meals. If you're a farmer in Brandon, Manitoba, for example, and you want to you want to deliver dishes to people in Winnipeg, for example, or in Brandon, you could set up a ghost kitchen right next to Winnipeg to deliver food to different folks by way of having them order through food delivery apps like Skip the Dishes, for example, or Uber Eats. There's lots of different models that can emerge out of COVID, and you just need to think about it and think outside the box a little bit.
So those are some of the things that have changed. What are some of the things you think should change as a result of this? I mean, have we identified places in the food chain that we have to make some fundamental shifts?
Yes, I believe that COVID has made a case for more processing in Canada. You see, processing is the forgotten child. We often talk about farmers, we often talk about consumption and grocers. We rarely think about or talk about what's in the middle, which is processing. And we saw most of the problems we saw within the supply chain was related to processing. People getting sick. Farmers had to dump milk because they didn't have any choice. Really, they had to dump milk. Animals had to be euthanized. Potatoes were thrown away, mushrooms, and so on and so forth, because they did not have any options. And this is problematic in Canada. And if we actually make processing the centerpiece of our agri-food strategy in Canada, then everyone wins. Because if we don't do it, everyone will lose. And farmers are the first one to lose. And we saw that during COVID.
So, I mean, I think historically in Canada, the focus of agricultural policy has in fact been on primary production. You're talking about shifting that focus to that middle sector, the processing sector.
But if you go to Agri-Food Canada, they'll tell you, well, you should go to innovation, you should go to Industry Canada. And if you go to Industry Canada and you talk about food processing, they'll send you back to agri-food. So there's no place, there's no home in government to have these kinds of discussions. And that's why the strategy, the food strategy that we'll have in Canada, should actually make this a centerpiece. And that centerpiece, that focus could lead to a different kind of government to support the sector.
Thank you very much for your insights today, Sylvain.
My pleasure.
Sylvain Charlebois is a food commentator, and he's a professor of food distribution and policy in the faculties of management and agriculture at Dalhousie University. Thanks again.